Welcome to the 6-part mini tutorial series where I take you through the process of creating a stylized game asset. The series assumes that you have an understanding of Maya and you have an understanding of Substance Painter. If you would like to learn more about 3D, or if you would like to learn more about the softwares, check out our courses on Udemy. You can find a link for that down in the description. In this section of the tutorial series, we're going to take a look at doing some hand painting inside a Substance Painter and how we can utilize fill layers with mask to accomplish this task. This will add a higher level of stylization to our asset and bring in a bit more appeal and uniqueness to the final product. All right, so now that we have a nice base built up, it could be nice to add in some custom hand-painted textures here. This is where artistry comes in, and a lot of times having a nice stylized reference comes in. I have a couple of these, and this one I feel like is maybe a little bit too scarce, but maybe it's close to what I'm going for. This one here feels like too much, so maybe a happy medium. Now, how do I approach this? Well, I approach this the same way I approach everything else. I'm very unoriginal. I create a fill layer, surprise, surprise, and then we come down here and we add a black mask. But this time, we're going to right-click and we're going to add paint. And we can paint right on top of here. Now, there's different ways we can paint inside a substance. Right now, our brush is set to some different settings than we start with. So first off, I selected the Artistic Heavy brush, which if I go ahead and brush and I use a Wacom pen, you can see on a light stroke and on a heavy stroke looks like that. Not really what I like. We could also come in here to something like a basic soft, and you can see we get something like that. That's maybe a little bit nicer to what I'm looking for. And with the soft brush fall off, the larger, the softer it gets, and the smaller, the harder. So you actually have a lot of control there, and you can also blend kind of nicely. We're not going to be doing a whole lot of blending with this method, but you can see that looks pretty good. Now I'm just going to start a fresh paint layer, and we can talk a bit about the paint menu. Over here is where you can adjust your brush. So if you're familiar with Photoshop, you can adjust it here with the same sort of settings. I'm using the bracket keys here to increase size. So that's how I'm adjusting this. And once again, we can paint whatever color we want initially because what we're doing here is we're painting a mask, right? Now, the useful setting in here I want to talk about is this alignment here. You'll see it's currently set to tangent wrap. And what tangent wrap does is it paints along the surface in 3D, meaning it can go up and over surfaces. But you might prefer to switch to UV mode if you're working over here in the UV view. And that's actually my preference. As a disclaimer, I prefer painting in Photoshop over Substance Painter. There's just something about Photoshop I'm used to and I like. But Substance Painter is a great solution for when you need to go up and over an edge. Now, let's just get in here and kind of paint some of our first line work. I'm just going to come in here and start by painting a nice bit of grain, something that looks like a crack, and just kind of try and get a nice form to it. And I'll just come in and maybe add some volume to it as I go here. And it's been a minute since I've hand painted anything in Substance Painter, so I'm sure this is not going to look beautiful right out the gate. But we can get something like that, and we can come in here and maybe just paint in another one. And just kind of fill that in. And then maybe come down here and add in another line here. And I want to keep this fairly scarce for the style I'm going for. I'm going for something pretty basic, pretty plain, not high detail, just something that's going to read well from a distance. Don't really like that too much, but let's go ahead and adapt it, as we go. I'm going to make this called Painted Darks. And we could come in here and adjust this a number of ways. So for example, we could adjust the height to push in if we wanted to, which is kind of cool. I'm actually going to turn off everything else. Just use the sample brush here and just grab a nice dark color from my other composition here. And I might push that a little bit more. Let me look at the base color. Just a little bit darker, I think would be nice. Not too dark though. So maybe something like that. And there we go. We have our painted darks. And I can continue this process now, going through here, kind of deciding, how I want this to go. Usually a good way to do this is to actually look at your wood grain and follow it. So if you could find like a common line like there, I saw a nice little opportunity to maybe add in some darks there. kind of hard to paint across this metal area. If you needed to, just kind of as a disclaimer, you can also turn off the metal area. You can say I could disable that layer entirely here. Unfortunately, the wood doesn't go underneath it, so it doesn't really help us. But something like that. I like this area here, so we'll make a nice thick edge there, and then come down and bring that down into here. And you'll see that's going to be more spread out than the other side. And then we can just kind of resume our process over here. And maybe on the side, have one that just comes through the middle here. It doesn't go through the bottom. And I think that's all right. I don't think we need to have a dozen or so on every side. This side has some nice lines kind of grouped here that I like. So I'm going to give that some love. And I might want to come up on the high point a little bit more. I'm not really liking this too much here in terms of this. Maybe a little bit more character. And once again, I'm painting in flat lit mode. I liked what happened there. We got that nice little knot. Happy accident. I'm painting in flat lit mode so I can really see what's going on here. Now I do have to be careful here. If I bring this over the top, you'll notice I'm just getting an error there. And that's because this is mirrored. So I'd have to kind of guess the side that's going to go to. So I'm not going to bring that one down all the way, but it is something I can consider later on. This one here, I like the idea of maybe bringing this here, bringing this down, and giving this one a nice almost crack down the middle, and just coming back and giving it a wooden knot. And that's something I picked up from the wood grain there, add a nice directionality to it. So good opportunity to add in some character. And part of me actually wants to add a second branch here, which I'm not so sure about. I think that looks too mirrored. I want that detail to kind of stand on its own. So it looks nice. And just come back in here and continue making some of these artistic choices. So I apologize if there's a lot of weird background noises. My children have decided to take a bath, and I'm right next to the bathroom. So there'll be some happy squeals probably, and splashes, and maybe the occasional scream. That all comes with the territory of being a parent. So, all right. So something like that. Come down here and just kind of feel it out. With wood, it's really a process. You just kind of have to trust it as you go. I think this is a good opportunity here to maybe add in a split up here somewhere. So you'll see I'm coming and painting across here for the first time, kind of breaking that. You'll see on the bottom there, hey, we actually aligned it with that one. So, hey, when life gives you lemons. Go ahead and run that across there. Why not? So that way, we start to break that barrier. We start to integrate these different elements a bit more. And I might do that across a couple of these because I feel like it'd be nice. I'm starting to get that lag I mentioned that you get from painting. I don't know why, but Substance Painter loves to lag. I think it's because it records every brush stroke. There's probably some settings I need to change to make it work a little bit better on my computer, but there we go. Now, for this one, I might want to just add a couple of these running across the top. If I wanted them to be more like scratches, I could give them different angles like what I just did there, so they don't run straight on. And you can see if I paint one on top, I can paint one on the bottom. And I don't want to go crazy with it, like one per thing. We could have maybe one every other one. Maybe we could just have a couple of them. We could adjust the thicknesses of them if we want to. But you do have to be careful because remember, anyone I put on top, I also have to come and I have to put on bottom here, which is a bit of a challenge. Now, I somehow keep aligning these to the existing line, which is kind of interesting. That is completely unintentional, but also kind of welcome at the same time, because it does make that feel a bit more complete coming across there, which is kind of fun. I guess it's not rocket science, though. If this line's there, then that line's going to be there, right? But we could add those to break that up. If we wanted to do slashes like that one has, we could also consider, breaking the barrier there. I don't think I want to go that far. I think I just want to think of these as kind of large cracks in the wood, something to add a bit more character. You know, if I wanted to kind of cleave across here to have one that is more expansive, I can do so. And maybe comes down to the other side. And then maybe something similar here, just kind of a smaller notch. And we could come down to the bottom and play around with those. The symmetry might start to be a little bit noticeable here, unfortunately, but we'll see. And somehow I do keep aligning those bottom ones. So might want to just hop on this side here too. We've been giving a lot of attention to that front side. We might want to just do some that are only on the interior. That way it looks interesting from the top. And I'll do a couple of these just to apply the exercise. However, just remember you check top and bottom. Fortunately, that's mirroring perfectly 1-to-1. So hey, that's a easy win there. All right. And then these ones have none side by side, which feels a little bit strange. I'm not completely opposed to it. Maybe we'll give them a couple, though. That way they have something here. Maybe a nice little corner one there. And maybe a longer midsection one would be good. So that one gets a bit of love. And then we'll come down here and continue these up. Just make sure these align as good as possible. I'm hitting X there to swap colors, just like I would in something like Photoshop. So just remember X swaps between black and white when masking. So you can actually do that pretty easily in here. Something I might do here is consider expanding these out a bit more and maybe even connecting them into this one for more of a split to add in more character and, you know, getting it to look the way we want. So it's kind of just really, like I said, a process at the end of the day and determining how we want this to look, what kind of style we want to be using, and what kind of effect we want it to have overall. I kind of like that one, but I feel like it's very different than some of the others, but not really. I think it fits good enough. I am going to, however, continue this to more of a point. Maybe not. Okay. Something like that. Okay, so I think that'll do okay for the initial dark pass. However, I did forget the tops and bottoms, so let's get some in here. We can just come along here and just get some nice dark lines. I think part of this is I'm not liking my brush size so much, so I do have to be careful there because it's making me do more work than I have to. So something like that is nice. That one, I think I'll go ahead and use this as an opportunity to make that kind of a knot. And then do the same over here, just kind of add in a couple of these. Fill that in. And do the same here. Okay, so add in a little one here, and then these side ones here don't have a whole lot going on. So I don't know how much attention they're going to need, but maybe just get one across here. And I'm not too worried about how it looks. And then maybe just a little notch over here. Okay, and the nice thing is those mirrored to the bottom, so we don't have to paint them again. So that's going to give me my painted darks. You'll see as the base material, this is kind of what they look like here. And like I mentioned, at any time, if I wanted to kick on the heights here, we could use height to kind of adjust this. Apparently I do have one running across there that I forgot about. So I'll just hop into here real quick and paint that one out. So that gives us some base stripes. Now, rule with striping. If you have darks, you tend to have lights. So I'm going to create another layer here and make this our paint lights. We're going to add a black mask just like we did before. We're going to right click. We're going to add paint. And this time I'm actually just going to sample the existing color here we have for the lights. We'll just sample right from here, the lighter color we have. And if I can find the lightest light like zooming in here, that would be a good one to go with. And we can use that to kind of paint up our edges for some nice fidelity here and to be consistent. Now I am going to save, it is getting a little bit laggy and it could crash on me. Sometimes saving clears the cache, so sometimes that works to make it lag less. But what I'm going to do now is just come along these, and I'm just going to add a nice highlight edge to these that is going to give me what I'm looking for. Now, you could also consider jumping into opacity at this stage. I haven't talked too much about opacity, but we can use brush opacity up here. If you come up here to stroke opacity and flow opacity, I can set these down to maybe 30 and 30. And this will allow me to kind of build things up a little bit more softly. So now I have a bit more control over this. That's probably something I should have done with the darks, but I'm just kind of going to get something quick. And I think with the lights, I might be more prone to blend them into the grain than with the darks. I can also use this as an opportunity to paint in the light edges here to just have a little bit more fullness to them as well. And maybe even consider coming in here and looking for opportunities to kind of pick up on the wood grain to accentuate the directionality of things here and just make these pop a little bit more. Now, it depends on if I want to do that in this pass or not. I'm actually just going to do this pass as these edges, so that way I make sure, I get the edge pass in here that I want for these highlights. With highlights, you can either go around both sides or one side, depending on the lighting setup of your game. If you're doing a game that is going to use real-time lighting, not bait lighting, if it's going to use lighting that changes in environments, I suggest just doing it around both sides. Usually looks better rather than just around one. But if you know you have a set light directionality in a game, you can bias your highlights to it. And that can be a great way to add more depth to your object and just make it read better, especially if you're using flat lighting, which once again, if you're not familiar with flat lighting, is when you have no lights at all, you're painting all the lighting into your objects. So something to consider. Now I did touch up the side there. It did kind of feel necessary. I'm going to come from here to here. I'm just painting across that. Once again, kind of looking for opportunities here to maybe pick on some highlights that are outside of the scratch area to give me a little bit more detail, a little bit more character. And just continue up here. And remember, we can always come back and erase these if anything feels off. Now, this is where I also, once again, want to just remind you guys, trust in the process. A lot of the times with art, it doesn't look good till it's done. It doesn't look good till it's across the entire surface. Sometimes you finish, it doesn't look great because it just needed one more pass. So just kind of be mindful that it is a process. Now, one of the nice things I am getting here is I am painting across these seam lines, which is allowing me to integrate this a little bit better. And like I mentioned, some of the things like these corners I can fill in a little bit more if I want. Unfortunately, this is different from up there, right? So the line's in the same spot, but some areas are different. So not quite getting the one-to-oneness there that I might want, but that's okay. And I'm just going to push the outline there a little bit more. Just painting this. Since I only have partial opacity, it's just filling in the line a little bit better. It's not going crazy with it. And it's just giving me a little bit more character there that I am missing. So I'm just going to do this one plank at a time, basically. And part of the reason it's responding the way it is because I do have these layers built up, which, if you're catching this, you want to check out the previous sections. If you don't quite remember what I'm talking about or know what I'm talking about. But those previous layers I built up, the curvature, the ambient occlusion, those are all on top of this, which is really nice. Okay, so that finishes up one area there, and I can get a feel for the effect it has. You can see together, that's the effect. I can always dial the opacity up or down later, and I can always turn these off if I don't like them as well, which, hey, maybe that'll be the case. But at this point, it's just a matter of kicking back, relaxing, and making art. So doing some painting here. Hand painting does take a while when it comes to a 3D asset. It makes a world of difference, though. Nowadays, realism is very much easier to achieve. I could have had a realistic barrel done hours ago. And, you saw with the smart materials how easy that could be. It can be as simple as literally just dragging and dropping a couple smart materials on, and voila, you have something that could go into, a realistic RPG in no time. But stylized stuff takes a little bit more time, and it has a bit more longevity. There's a lot of companies nowadays that are starting to target stylized games for two reasons. One is longevity, because they last longer. The reason why is their graphics don't exactly need to be refreshed. So excellent game would be something like Minecraft, and maybe 20 years from now or 100 years from now, this will age like sour cream. But guess what? This will be a completely obsolete video by then too. But anyways, something like Minecraft, when it came out, for all you youngins out there, a lot of us old salty gamers were like, hey, the graphics do not suck, I'm not going to play it. It's like garbage Legos. But guess what? Garbage Legos survived. It's still around, and whatever we were playing at the time isn't anymore. And that's because they took a very stylistic approach to their game that created a timeless look, something that, is a signature of the franchise. And even though it looked like garbage compared to the other games at the time, I think maybe it came out during PlayStation 3 era. All the PlayStation 3 games are, gone now. And Minecraft is still with us. So, long story short, stylized games have a lot of longevity. They don't die easily. So, stylized art is actually pretty desired right now. I'd say realism, you see it a lot more in the AAA scene than stylized, but there are some companies that, could be considered AAA at this point that do stick to the stylized approach, and their games have a lot of longevity. Another area, obviously, is for performance reasons. So, as of making this video, there's a game that exists called Fortnite, and Fortnite has also been around a while. But what's unique about Fortnite is it is a three-dimensional first-person shooter that you can play on a console, and it looks good. And you can also play on your mobile phone. And that is a huge difference. The difference between a PS5 and a mobile phone is massive, but you can play it on both. Now, what that does is it enables the game to have a wider audience to reach. And a wider audience means more opportunities for money, essentially. So when it comes to game choice, doing something super realistic, targeting a console or a high-end PC, you're already kind of putting yourself into a marketing niche where you're limiting the number of sales you can have. Which is weird to think, but almost everyone has a mobile phone these days. Sorry if you don't and you're watching this, but hey, if you have a computer, all the better. So that means, their game can literally appeal to almost the entire population. But if we take a look at another game, that maybe is PC only, I don't know many people with a computer in their house anymore, unless they work in an industry like 3D. So, it's very limited. Obviously you're targeting the PC gamer, and that's a relatively small portion of the total market. So, in short, stylized, a lot more monetary opportunities nowadays than high-end realistic. And I know we all love high-end realistic. Well, maybe not all of us, but yeah, it's something to think about, especially if you're the type of person who's looking to make your own projects. So this is taking a while. We could save some time by having overlap some of these slates of the wood. I'm also not really liking how this is looking too much, but that's going to be a process of kind of blending and dialing it up and down. Part of it's because I'm experiencing that lag here, which, like I mentioned, I could clear out by restarting Substance. It's kind of a cache issue, I'm pretty sure. I might also just be able to clear the video cache while it's live and still fix it. So lots of things I could probably experiment with and probably should get more well acquainted with. especially since the projects I'm going to be working on in the near future here are going to rely much more on hand-painted approaches. But sometimes you just got to tackle things when it's time. I think my son's singing in the other room, so hopefully you enjoy getting serenaded. Also, hopefully he doesn't sing anything that's against copyright guidelines here. I might have to talk louder to make sure. So anyways, joys of parenting. Yeah, so consider that, when approaching stylized graphics, it's always an important thing to kind of keep in mind. Longevity. And if you're the type of person who's just starting out and you're debating your portfolio, should you go stylized, should you go realistic? The answer is both. You really should have a bit of both. It's important to be able to show realism, just because even though I said that a lot of companies are going stylized, a lot aren't. And part of it's because realism's a lot easier now. There's a lot of aspects about realism I haven't gotten to, but if you go to something like the Unreal side of things, you have access to the Megascan library, you have access to metahumans, you have access to SpeedTree, and all these just give you instant realistic looking stuff. So as much as I want to say there is a big push for stylized right now, there's an even bigger push in some ways for realism, just because you don't really need as many artists anymore for realism. There's a good chance you could probably make a game that's realistic looking now without a single artist on the team. You probably wouldn't have the best game though, because artists have a lot of other value. But that is something to consider. Now, the other reason to push for realism in your portfolio is to have something that's measurable against the real world in terms of observation. So, when you're looking to bring on a 3D modeler, you want to make sure they can do the job, but you also want to make sure that they're drawing from the real world, that they understand how things look, and that they have more expansive capabilities a lot of the times. There are some exceptions. There are studios that are just looking for a particular style. They're not looking for anything more expansive than that. And if you just like stylized art, go for it. It limits your job opportunities, but at the same time, if you become the best stylized artist out there, you have job security as well, because who's not going to want to hire you, right? So, useful things to think. So, summary, have a little bit of both if you're starting out is a good idea. And if you're the type of person who just does realistic, try stylized so you can understand the process. Even if you do it badly, who cares? And right now, I kind of feel like I'm falling into that camp because, man, is this laggy on me. I'm actually just trying to get through it as well because I need to get on with my day. But at least it's looking okay. It's one of the things I don't particularly enjoy about doing wooden assets or anything with grain is how many passes you have to take depending on the style. Like I mentioned, along the journey earlier, there are several points we could have stopped depending on the style of game that we were aiming for. So, did we have to go to this extent? Absolutely not. We didn't have to get into hand painting at all. We could have left it where we just had it. This just kind of adds that final little pop. As I go here, you're going to notice that my painting is getting sloppier and sloppier. It's because of how I'm intending on using it, if I'm going to be honest. I'm also not doing the edges as diligently as I had been. I might do another pass to get those in. I'm mostly just trying to get these little lines in here, and that's because I'm getting near the finish line. Yay, finish line. Anyways, let's go ahead and finish those. And then, oh, I just forgot there's a top to it. Oh, the agony. All right. We'll get there. We'll get there. But yeah, sometimes it feels like that. Now, I am talking to myself. Obviously, if you're listening to this video, I'm talking to you. But as I'm making this, I'm talking to myself. And that's not as enjoyable as what I would normally be doing. Normally, when I have something like this, I would put on some music. I'd put on a podcast. One of the things I enjoy listening to is crime shows, true crime. There's some cool true crime on YouTube. So that's usually what I end up listening to when I'm doing this. However, right now I am talking to myself. It's a great way to go insane quick. All right, so let's go ahead and finish this last stretch. If it's too bad in the recording, I'll just time-lapse it. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of speed through this last section here. At this point, you guys know what I'm up to. I'm going to do a half-hearted job finishing this off, and we'll call it a day. Okay, so now that I finished that pass, I'm going to add another paint layer here really quick, and as much as I don't want to do this, one thing I'm going to want to do is come along the edges here and just kind of make it consistent. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger and just come in here and add in some of these lines. Also might even consider blending some of the edge work a little bit more, but I think I'll wait for another pass if I intend to do that. But just kind of give these the fullness that they're lacking, that I might want them to have on top of what is already going on. And then I'm going to dial back this one because some of my brush strokes just aren't that clean, and I really just kind of started rushing at a point and had several interruptions in between that just made me not care too much. So I'm going to use opacity to cover my mistakes. And I could always do another pass. I'm also experiencing some of that lag, so all that is kind of painful to deal with as an artist. You can see the rotations here, how it's just jumping around. That's something I need to figure out, like I mentioned. So if you're encountering this, like I mentioned, closing this and reopening it will do it. It also could be like a disk cache error. My computer has some issues with memory due to the drives being older on this thing. That's one of the things I'm not the biggest fan of with solid state drives. Kind of feel like they might be more of a scam at this point, or I'm just setting them up wrong. But like I said, Adobe products, they just eat away at your memory, and you kind of need a dedicated drive for all of their products now, which is annoying because, they already cost a lot of money per month. So, yeah, be nice to not have to purchase special equipment just to operate them. But hey, they're powerful tools. That's why I'm using them. So, go figure. Complain. All right. Maybe add a little bit more in there. And just continue down here and into these areas. So I'm going to go ahead and time-lapse this, but, same story here. I'm just kind of going over the sides, adding in a bit of a thickness to the line work, making it look a little bit more worn, maybe touching up, some of the wooden areas a bit here. But all really the same stuff at the end of the day. You'll notice that I just restarted this to regain the ability to paint in real time. It's just becoming too painful there. You can see some of my work here is really sloppy looking now. But you can see how restarting it clears out that cache. Like I mentioned, there might be a way to do that in real time in here. I don't know. But I'm going to call that good for this pass. Now, what I'm going to do here is just take these paint lights and dial them down so that they aren't so aggressive. And I actually might bring them back up and add another layer to this, just add paint, and do another pass here where I just kind of integrate this across here and use the grain information to kind of pick up on some highlights and other areas that make for some nice detailing and continuation. so that way we get some nice wood grain across here. So this is turning into something a little bit more stylized now at this stage, working into a lot of hand-painted techniques and integrating our detail more. So this is where we start to get that happy medium between the two styles that I was mentioning, where we had one with a lot of heavy dark lines, we had one with very minimal. So what we end up here with is kind of a medium where we're not only using darks, we're using lights, and we're using our existing wood grain information here to kind of inform the design and add character to our wood overall. And so kind of creating our own style at this point of something that's not quite as scarce and something that's not quite as heavy, and hopefully striking a middle ground in between. And like I mentioned, I'm kind of motivating these lines based on the grain I'm seeing, and just using that to help me kind of find some of these finishing touches that I feel like are going to tie this together a bit better, especially when since I went a lot heavier here with some of these light areas. And give it a nice look. Now, hopefully I won't lag like crazy towards the tail end of this and have to restart again. It's one of my pet peeves with Substance Painter, so I might be doing some research in the near future to see if I can fix that. If I do, and I figure out a fix, I'll probably do a follow-up video for you guys. Or if somebody knows how to fix this, feel free to throw it down in the comments so everyone can see, including myself, and we can all benefit from each other's knowledge. So here I'm kind of playing some connect the dots across those. Continue this here. Now, something to think about while I'm getting into these higher detail passes is when you're creating a larger piece, let's say you're creating a level, you're creating an entire video game, and you're picking a stylistic choice. Do so with caution. The amount of time I've spent on this, you can expect to spend on every last single wood asset in the game. Okay, so you want all the wood to match. You're going to need to give it the same level of detail, right? So this is just a lowly little barrel that no one's going to care about probably, unless we use it as like a loot crate. Good chance no one's going to notice it. If the barrel has way more detail than the wooden building that's behind it, you're going to have an issue, right? So you need them to all match up and be consistent. So just be mindful of that. I would probably caution away from what I'm doing currently if I was doing my own production. If I was, doing something smaller, or if I was doing something where I know we would have some tight deadlines, I'd pick a different art style than this. Probably one of the ones I had previously, like just a base color or maybe just the gradients. So something to consider there. So at this stage, I can go ahead and lower the opacity here, kind of dial this into what I like. I'm not going to do the same with the darks. I actually kind of want to keep those the way they are. However, I do potentially want to add some dark strokes. So we can make this painted darks and then add something like cracks. And I could duplicate this, Control D, to keep the color, delete the paint layer, and we could just add paint. And we could do a similar pass here, but with darks, and this could look nice. So just kind of coming in here and filling this in. I'm going to increase my opacity a bit more than what I had. Maybe not. Okay, I think I accidentally messed up my spacing there. So I'm just going to reset the brush. One of the nice things about Substance Painter, if you don't save it, it doesn't save. And I'm just going to come in here and add in some dark lines, hand painted, of course, and just kind of motivate them based on the lights. It's kind of nice if they accompany the lights, kind of accent them. That makes them pop a little bit better. In terms of layering, I do have my darks below my lights, so the lights will always appear on top. So kind of a nice little feature. And if you're wondering, this layer I do intend to dial back. So that's why it's going to be a little bit aggressive and also very quick, because I'm using the light lines that are already there to kind of add this wood grain accent underneath them. And you kind of just using this to break those up, so maybe they have more variety and the structure isn't as uniform. Notice I'm mostly painting this planarly, meaning I'm not really going up and above the top part. That's something I'll have to kind of decide. I do want to keep those areas kind of light, so I'm not really worried about getting darker wood grain into them so much. It's just kind of a thing. I don't really need to worry about that. Now, since this is a lot less precise too, and I'm just kind of quickly doing strokes and I'm doing broad and large strokes, I am not getting as much lag as when I was trying to be precise and make shapes. So something to kind of be aware of. There is a little bit of an issue there with that crisscrossed. I don't know why. I'm just going to erase that. And there we go. And I think we've already gone full circle. So there we go. And I can just dial that down a little bit. And I may consider dialing down the dark ones here a little bit as well. And just kind of dialing these all together as I see fit for whatever style I'm going for. It just depends on how much I want to push this. These darks as well, if I want to, I could add an even darker dark. So we could add something here that's like cracks, and we could add black mask, add paint, and this time around, literally just change the color to black. Just come in here and make sure it's set to color. And in the paint here, just come in here and add the darkest darks into here. Okay, well, for some reason that wanted to sample the color, which is very annoying. I don't know if I can undo that. Yeah, of course it's not an undoable thing. There we go. That's fine. And we want to paint white. And just kind of come in here into these cracks. And if I have a deep area, paint it to be a deep area. And this is how we can start to fake things like depth. So rather than having to model this in, I could have this appear to be painted in here. And this is one of those stylized flat lighting techniques that you can utilize to kind of fake depth, especially if you're not going to be using something like a normal map. And this can be very useful in stylized art. Now, you're probably thinking that black is way too strong, and you're correct. There are a few steps I need to take to kind of dial this back and make this more appropriate. But this will give us at least a level there of gradation where we can say, hey, you know, this area is really deep. And then we can dial it in with opacity to kind of make the center of these cracks maybe stand out a bit more from the outline. And this is one of those things where I've been doing this at 100% opacity. I probably should just restart and do it at a lower opacity so I could have some blending. So I'll go ahead and set this to maybe 50-ish. And man, I don't know what button I keep pressing that does that. But that's very annoying. All right, let's go back to base color here. Okay, there we go. Now I can kind of paint this up to have more of a gradient and just have more control over it. So better to not paint at 100% opacity. That way we have the ability to blend and to actually make it look like these have little cracks out of them. So once again, take your time with this. This is going to be one of those ones where, you know, it requires some level of precision. I'm going to have to work my way across to each one of these. It's not going to be quick like the basic lines I just added in a second ago. This one's actually going to take some work. So I'm going to let this go into a time lapse, but you know, base premise here is paint into the cracks. What I'm doing here is just painting the midsection first. That way I'm getting the darkest point there. That way we get that indication that this is the darkest shadow region of these things. It gives a better sense of depth that this is going into this object. It's not just sitting on top, and gives us that feel, that three-dimensional feel we're going for. I'm going to work a little bit smarter here. I keep running into this issue where these top ones keep pulling down. And watch this be the last one I need to do, ironically. But I could save myself a little bit of time by hitting these ones up all first. And then when I go to the bottom ones, they'll just kind of be ready to go. All right, cool. So that takes care of the side ones. We'll get to the top now. Notice this responds differently on the top. That's because this has a larger UV area. So be aware, since I scaled these UV shells and I'm painting in the 3-dimensional view, that it does react a bit differently. You get more pixels when the brush sets down. So that's the reason why it looks a little bit different right out the gate here. Okay, cool. I'm going to call that good enough. Looks horrendous, but what I can do is just dial the opacity now to get these in here. And yeah, figure out what I like. Don't accidentally delete your layer there. That's a bad idea. And decide how I want to shade this as well. You know, if I'm going to have it in this material mode, then yeah, maybe I want to keep it this way. And if I'm going to go the route of using stylized effects for this, I can also consider adjusting the height to these and all that good stuff. So it depends on, you know, the final result. So let's start with, you know, paint to detail cracks. I could introduce something like height here. We could just push these in slightly, like -0.01, maybe -0.1. Okay, maybe -0.05. So something very subtle. We could come in here to the roughness and set those to be super rough, so that way we're losing the light. We could then come in here to the paint to darks copy. These ones here, once again, since they're darker, I'll just cue the roughness. Maybe not that rough. We could also play around with the height here, just kind of pulling them down a bit. We could do the other cracks. This is the deep cracks now. We could play around with their height. I don't like that though, so I think we're just going to stick with the stylized color here and maybe even dial those down more. And the base color here, you know, I kind of liked these, but maybe I make these even more subtle to where they're just kind of references almost. Well, depends on what we're going for. So yeah, we can kind of determine how we want that to go. So I don't know if I like that too much. So yeah, we can just kind of keep dialing these in. If you're going to go with the metalness roughness workflow, then you should definitely consider roughness at least with these. Maybe make those a little bit rougher there. Cracks and crevices, you know, we can play around with dialing their roughness to be more or less. I almost like them having more gloss, which is ironic, but I'm going to go with less. And that in itself is going to make them kind of pop without having height, which is kind of interesting. Do the same thing here with these darker ones. I could actually take this the opposite direction though and give this more gloss if I wanted to, which is kind of interesting, though I don't want to give them too much. I actually might leave those ones off since they're kind of smaller details. And even the painted dark cracks I might leave off because they're too large to really give me a good effect. So, you know, at this point, it's a lot of experimentation to just kind of dial this into the style we're looking for. I do have all these down here that I could bring in some roughness with as well. So we could add variation on these gradients, which might be kind of interesting. I think these would have a bigger impact overall on creating sort of a wood grain effect. All right, I think we'll call that good for now on the base pass here for this. So hopefully that gives you an idea on how to approach some things, how to, you know, maybe make some stylized textures and some different tiers of it, just to kind of show it next to these two here. They were kind of the source of inspiration a bit. So you can see how I've kind of drawn on those. I would say I probably would want to give the metals a little bit more attention. They could use a hand-painted pass at this stage. Or, they could even just use filter pass too. That is an option. So right now, I have highlights, I have a basic fill layer, maybe some damages and a little bit more wear would do them some good. In terms of the highlighted metals, I could also just add a paint layer right on top here. And with my brush here, rather than using the one I've been using, we could come in and use something like an artistic heavy here. And we could just paint along some of these areas here to make them a little bit more uneven, a little bit more intense. And we could even consider switching it to be black and removing some areas if we didn't want to have uniform edge wear across here. So I could just kind of noodle some of that out of there. So, it depends at this stage what exactly we'd be wanting. I think I prefer just a little bit more wear if I was going to go down the route to make it kind of match the wood grain. And, actually, those are curved lines. You want to avoid your brain tricking you and thinking, oh, that's a nice edge we could follow. It's like, actually, no, that's supposed to be flat. So just be mindful of that. But, take your time with it, have fun, and enjoy the process of making art. And just remember, you got to call it quits at some point, but with art, it really can go on forever. So something like this, I probably will never be completely satisfied. I can also lower the opacity of this layer, which is actually really a cool idea, and I might take advantage of that. So if I intend to lower the opacity of something, by the way, to kind of dial it in, I'll do things a little bit more aggressive. So for example, here around these corners, I'm just kind of hitting this up a bit more to maybe remove some of the angularity. Since those do hit at a right angle, you can kind of paint a line across them. And just kind of dial them back with opacity. That way I get sort of this worn, faded look. And I might continue that across some of these areas. So you'll see here, I just kind of hit that up. And then if I added another paint layer, I know we're going crazy now, we could come in here and maybe just kind of add some generic fog wear across here. And I'd probably want to hit this up with a varying opacity brush. Right now I'm stroking at 100% again, and really I'd want more variation than that. Remember, there's also a bottom one of these, so I've kind of been neglecting that, but you can see here I could tone that down to just get some wear patterns. And it's very subtle there, but you can see how that, helps kind of break up that form a little bit more and make it a bit softer. So I'll just come down here and do kind of the same thing here. With the opacity set, kind of just tip these up to have some areas that have a little bit more of a soft roll off from that hard edge. And just make it look a little bit less perfect. And like I said with the woods, remember with the metals that anything you do to this metal, you're going to have to do to another metal. So be mindful of that when you're picking your style for your project, because consistency across a production is important, and you will find yourself in a world of never-ending production if you are not careful. And I think that just comes with the territory of being an artist. As an artist, we always want to push for more. And that's why we need to pair up with people who reel us in and smack us around and tell us why we're making bad life choices by making good art. Right? The first bad life choice we made was becoming an artist. Now we suffer for all eternity wanting to make stuff. Okay, cool. Now we could break that up even further if you add a fill, and we could just look through the various grunges here. I might go into something like metal here and look for one of these that has a natural metallic feel to it. So maybe something like this. We could drag this on top, and we could set this to something like a multiply, and we could use this to break up everything. So if I come in here with balance, we can play around with that in contrast. And you can see how that allows me to kind of break up all this detail. And I can even consider, bringing these up now if I want to at this stage to play around with them. All right. So you'll see how that dials that in, has a little bit more realistic feel, which is kind of nice. I feel like the metal might be mismatching the wood a little bit. The wood doesn't quite feel real enough. The metal feels too real. So that's where I might come in here and try out a wood real quick, just to see if I couldn't add some character to this. I know we did the wood rough, but we might want to try a different one here. It's kind of cool. They have stylized bark in here. I feel like they used to have different wood textures. Could just be I have some of my own custom ones in here too, because I know I do. And we could look at the smart materials as well for things like wood and see if there's any of these that we might like. I think I usually like this walnut one. This one has just kind of a nice base grain to it that's relatively unmotivated. So we could bring this down here into our layer stack, and you'll see still looks perfectly fine. Gotta love these drags and drops nowadays. But just like I did before, I'm going to come in here and add a filter, not a generator. Just go ahead and slap on the gradient there and an overlay, and play around with this. You'll see that it really affected the color a lot. I could come in here with the opacity and dial this down for the color. I could also bring this down because it's on top of everything in terms of coloration, and just use it for the roughness and the normal map if I want to have a normal map in here. But if I come in here and we drag this above various areas, you'll see it has a different effect. And I'm actually not a big fan of this, so I might add something like a levels here just to see if I can push this around a bit more to have more of an effect that I'm looking for. But this is surprisingly subtle and not really what I would want. So I might just skip it and call this good. I think I will, because I'm going to be messing with this for all eternity. But there we go. Stylized barrel in Substance Painter. So in this section, we kind of talked about hand painting. I'm going to wrap this up here for the textures, though. We'll talk about exporting and getting it set up in a bit. But that is going to be sort of the process of adding some hand-painted finish here and some detailing. So I'm going to drop these underneath thickness. And I might adjust some of the layers here just to kind of see where things are at in terms of opacity. I can also change the order of layers, which interestingly enough would have a pretty big impact on things. But the nice thing is I can dial these up and down, and I can determine if I want these for a specular workflow or a non-specular. I kind of painted them with the intent of a non-specular workflow in mind, but yeah. Know your pipeline better than someone who's randomly making an art project after work. Moral of the story. All right, so I am going to try and stop dialing this in here. It's very hard for me to do. Just want it to look as perfect as possible. I had different opacities on these. I didn't. That could be something I could consider too, is rather than dialing up down the opacity of the whole, dialing the opacity of the individual masks. So something to think about there, for something like this, if I want to have a little bit more emphasis somewhere other than nowhere. And, I can do this with all of these, which is kind of nice. So any of these ones here that I have, also bring that up. I think I actually like that being a bit higher. And this one here is what it is. So I'm going to actually tone those ones down so they feel less like dark cracks, and then just let these dark cracks kind of indicate the dark cracks. And the top wear, I already dialed that down. Yeah, a lot, 4%. All right. So yeah, just kind of do your final tuning, final mastering, make your asset look as nice as possible. And go from there. And if you want to experiment with different types of wood grain, by all means do so. Like I mentioned, your best bet might be just coming down here and playing around with these base ones we kind of put in here initially. Some of these stacked with height and roughness is going to give you just kind of a base that you can play with. I don't really like any of them though, so I guess maybe not. I'll have to experiment with that one. There's probably one of these things that would give me what I'm looking for. I actually think maybe the more stylized grain would do the trick, but there's another option we can do after the fact. So we'll explore that. All right, so let's wrap this up, but that is some hand painting here in Substance. Thank you for watching this tutorial series. Be sure to like and subscribe for future content.